All right, we're live. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching this on the rerun, that's good too. But I want to talk about this new movie that's out. Everyone's talking about it. It's called Sound of Freedom. And the first impressions before seeing the film, mostly positive reviews from what I saw. But I always take that with a grain of salt because a lot of movies these days have good reviews and then you see it and it's terrible. So I didn't know what to expect. I was kind of like, had low expectations, but people kept talking about it, and it was seemed almost controversial. So I was like, well, I need to see this just to see what all the fuss is about. So I watched the movie. It starts off, and again, I kind of go in there taking it with a grain of salt, like, oh, it's supposed to be so great. Yeah, yeah, sure, it'll be great. I mean, I think 10 minutes in, 20 minutes in, I was like, oh, this is going to be intense, and you can tell that. I mean, it grabs you right away. It's one of those really good, it's like a Schindler's List or something where you just get hooked on the story. And I mean, if you have any sort of human emotion, you're going to get wrapped up in the stories of these kids and things. And it just really the movie really inspired me to stand up and talk about it and speak up against things like this, help raise awareness. And I would love to have the director on my podcast or one of the stars like Jim Caviezel. Hell, I mean, I'd probably settle for like the key third grip, which is probably what I'll be getting. But anybody to come on and talk about this movie because it was so great. What's interesting, so it was completed in 2018. No studio would take it for fear of losing money, according to the producer. And Netflix and Amazon are among those who passed. And it seems to be doing pretty well at the box office. I think it was like third or something. And I think it made more than Indiana Jones on one of the days or something. And so it only cost 14 million to make, 14 and a half million. So it's doing pretty well. But if you don't know what the movie's about, it's about human trafficking and little kids being taken from their families and sold to do bad things. You got to be careful about what I say on YouTube or I'll get in trouble. But Caviezel plays Tim Ballard, who's a former government agent who embarks on a mission to rescue children from traffickers in Colombia. And so it's got a positive, I'm not going to spoil it, but I mean, it's got a positive spin on it. You're seeing some horrible things, but there's a hero in the movie that's trying to help these kids. And I don't think you're prepared to see this play out on a big screen, right? I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And thankfully, I think the movie's PG-13 or something. It's not very graphic, but even alluding to something like this is going to make your stomach turn. And I've watched so many horror movies. I mean, I could see people getting murdered in a horror movie, and it's almost like no big deal. It's way more disturbing to see children or animals just even being hurt, not being killed, even just being uncomfortable or in pain is just really hard for me to stomach. And the director of this film, Alejandro Monteverde, I hope I said that right. I mean, this guy is so talented. Wow. I think he's created a masterpiece with this movie. The acting, Jim Caviezel, I think he's a very underrated actor. His eyes, I think that's how you can tell. I took some acting classes in college, and I remember that's something my acting teacher would tell me, like how he would look at I remember at the time ER, I think, was a big show. And he would say, like, you look at the guys on like ER, and it's like you could see it in their eyes, like, how serious they are. They're in touch with emotion. They're really acting. And then he compared that to, like, at the time, I think Melrose Place and how bad the acting was on that show. But I mean, so I look at this film and I look at Jim Caviezel and you can see it in his eyes. Like he's really feeling the emotion of what he's acting. And the co-stars all do a great job too. What's impressive to me is just how amazing the kid actors are, because it is not easy to act as a kid. They don't have a lot of experience acting. And a lot of the movies that you see with kids, sometimes they ruin it because they're just not very good actors or they're bad. I mean, I think that's one of the rules of Hollywood and acting is don't act with kids and don't act with animals. And but this time it worked out. I think the kids did a great job. I teared up personally. I don't cry a lot at movies. It's not like I was bawling, but I definitely teared up. And it's just, I almost felt like I needed to step out of the theater for a minute at one point because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. This is like really disturbing. It's uncomfortable. But I think that this movie needed to be made. And when you think about the purpose of making a movie, and I think this was something, and don't quote me, I could be wrong on this, but I believe it was Spielberg and Kubrick that had this conversation. And they were talking about making movies. And, they said that you should ask yourself, like, what is the point of making this movie? Like, what are you trying to achieve by making this movie? Is it just to make money? Are you trying to entertain people? And for me, it's kind of the same thing when I have a guest on my podcast. I always ask that question, like, why am I doing this interview? And it's usually one of three things. It's either I'm going to try to entertain people with some fun stories or interesting anecdotes, or I'm going to inspire them with something. The story of the guest's life is maybe very inspiring, how they came from nothing and now they're doing something really cool. Or I'm going to educate them. A lot of times I'll have guests on that are experts in things, and sometimes it's a combination of all three of those, right? But I think with this movie, The Sound of Freedom, I think it was made to both educate people and on the issue of human trafficking, but also to inspire them to actually do something and take action. And maybe that something about educating others on the issue is just telling them to go see this movie and let them figure it out for themselves. So I think the movie's really good. It's definitely going to move you emotionally. And if it doesn't, you might want to get yourself checked out because there's maybe something blocking there. Like maybe, I don't know what you call it, like maybe one of your chakras isn't in tune or something, because you should have some emotions seeing this movie. It's very powerful, very moving. And it's interesting because I'm very picky with movies. So I will say that I watch a lot of movies, but so many movies are just disappointing, right? Like the Indiana Jones is a perfect example. The latest one, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destiny or whatever it's called. I mean, that was just so disappointing, and it's crazy because that movie cost almost $300 million to make, and I mean, they could have hired the top writers and things, and it just something about it just didn't really inspire me. It didn't even really entertain me. It was boring a lot of the time. I kept waiting for something to happen, and it's kind of a letdown. This movie cost $14.5 million to make. The acting is so good. It's so inspiring and moving and emotional. And you get involved with the characters in the story, and you're rooting for the hero, Jim Caviezel playing Tim Ballard. He's like a superhero to these children. And it's really cool. It's based on a true story. So it's strange to me that this movie is being labeled like a conservative movie or a QAnon conspiracy movie. And I just don't understand all that. Is human trafficking, and is that a partisan issue? I mean, is one side against that? Because that just doesn't make any sense to me. So I know the critics from Los Angeles Times and New York Times refused to review it. And Rolling Stone attacked the movie. Let's see if I'm going to try to do this screen share thing. Hopefully this works. Okay, so Rolling Stone, yeah, The Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. The QAnon tinged thriller about child trafficking is designed to appeal to the conscience of conspiracy-addled boomer. Okay, well, let's here. Let me remove this. We're going to talk about this stuff in a minute here, but let me go back to that review. So let me read some more quotes from that. So the Rolling Stones, Miles Klee, he attended a packed matinee showing Sound of Freedom, starring Jim Caviezel, and walked away from the experience by suggesting attendees were QAnon supporters. He panned the film, calling it a hackneyed white savior narrative and scoffing at the white-haired audience who enjoyed it. He blasted Caviezel for promoting the film with a grossly exaggerated picture of global trafficking industry, lamenting that he primed the public to accept Sound of Freedom as a documentary rather than delusion by fomenting moral panic for years over this grossly exaggerated epidemic of child sex trafficking. There is visible suffering all around us in America, he wrote. There are poor and unhoused and people brutalized or killed by police. There are mass shootings, lack of healthcare, and climate disasters. And yet, over and over, the far right turns to these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting children, he added, comparing current attention to this issue with the 1980s satanic panic. Okay. So conspiracy theory, is it a conspiracy theory? I was curious myself. I don't have a side. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. So I just want the facts, just the facts, man. So let's see. Let's read through some of these. I mean, this is what I found on the internet. So if this is wrong, it may be inaccurate. It may be exaggerated. It may be underplayed. I don't know. But these are just some statistics that I found on the internet, and we can talk about this. And please, that's why I'm posting this on YouTube, because I want people to comment and tell me if I'm wrong, or if I'm right. That would be good too. So let's see. Okay, so human trafficking. Let's define that first. Human trafficking is the trade of humans for the purpose of forced labor, sexual slavery, or commercial sexual exploitation. It can occur within a country or transnationally. So they can take people from the US into another country, or take people like in this movie. Where did they start? I can't remember the country they started, but I think they ended up taking them to Colombia. So scary stuff. Now let's see. What else can we say about so we're talking specifically about children. Um, every year, this says, and this is on Wikipedia. So again, maybe this is not the most accurate. I don't know. I don't have there's not a lot of experts on this field here. Every year, 300,000 children. What happened here? Lost my. Oh, here we go. 300,000 children are taken from all around the world and sold by human traffickers as slaves. Okay, so that's one statistic. This was on a website I found that kind of specialized in this stuff. So these are some statistics. Again, I don't know how accurate this is, but this is what I found. I'm citing multiple sources here so we can kind of get a rough idea. Every year, approximately 8 million children are reported missing worldwide. In the US, 2,300 children are reported missing per day. Strangers abduct less than 1% of missing children. Parents are accountable for over 90% of abductions. So a lot of the stuff when you're talking about kids going missing and stuff, a lot of times it's just the own parents are taking them and they disappear. Or whereas in the movie, it's like, these strangers and it's sold into a trafficking ring. But when we talk about missing children, this is from remember America's Most Wanted? John Walsh. He has a website and a foundation, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it says when a children is reported missing to law enforcement, federal law requires that the child be entered into the FBI's National Crime Information Center. And according to the FBI, there were in 2022, 59,094 entries, and in 2021 was a little bit lower, 337,195. Okay, so now they say that 1 in 6 runaways is likely a victim of child sex trafficking. So I mean, there's a lot of like numbers here, the prevalence here. What is this? This is one here. Okay, according to scholar Kevin Bales, author of Disposable People, he estimates that as many as 27 million people are in modern day slavery across the globe. In 2008, the U.S. Department of State estimates that 2 million children are exploited by the global commercial sex trade. Okay, so again, these are things I'm reading on the internet. You can't always trust the internet, but that's why I'm doing multiple things here. Okay, what about so we do know one case that is for sure real. I think everybody's familiar with Epstein, right? So that was an interesting, and what's interesting about that is that I was trying to figure out like how many kids were involved in that, and it seems like they don't know, which is kind of scary. So estimates of the total number of girls allegedly abused by Epstein varies, with accounts ranging from a few dozen to over 100. Federal prosecutors had identified 36 underage victims. So the process, heavily redacted police report. Mentioned more than 100 Jane Does. So that's kind of interesting. So that's why some of these numbers seem to kind of be all over the place because, first of all, I think it's hard to track. And, but it's, I mean, if our agencies don't even know, I mean, this is a guy who got caught. I feel like they have records and things, right? And they still don't know. But here's another example. I had a woman on my podcast a while back, and I just happened to catch this news story. And now it's like, I feel like it's hard to find. But there was 8 people were arrested in Oklahoma City for allegedly trafficking a 15-year-old girl, a Texas girl, at a Dallas Mavericks game. Let's see, this was like a year ago in 2022. The teen went to the bathroom at Dallas American Airlines Center on April 8th while attending the game with her father and never returned. She was missing for 10 days until she was located by law enforcement at an extended stay America hotel in Oklahoma City, roughly 200 miles away. So I don't know how prevalent it is. I don't know how rare this stuff is, but it does happen. And this is like, I feel like this story, I didn't understand this at the time. I still don't actually, why this was not a bigger news story. And I remember I had the woman on, who they rescued the girl and they took her to the center, and she worked at a center for teen runaway girls and woman shelter basically, and really nice woman, and she made it sound like this stuff was not that uncommon. But definitely we talked about this story, and I just couldn't figure out why was this not a bigger news story. I thought this was crazy. I mean, this is like something that definitely somebody should be shining a light on. I mean, it is on the news, so it is a real thing. But I think that's what you got to do is you got to do your own research, I guess, as they say, which is a controversial statement in its own. But look for yourself to see how common this stuff is. Is it real? Is it completely BS? I think the other thing is that people are saying it's QAnon stuff because some of the other things that the star of the movie and some of the people connected that made the movie or whatever, they talk about some other conspiracy theories that I'm not going to get into. And I can't speak on that stuff, whether it's true, whether it's totally false. I don't know. I just know with this film, the stuff that they're talking about, this is a real thing. I don't know exactly how prevalent it is, but I think people should see the movie and then make a decision for themselves. Either way, it's a very good film. And I mean, they show hidden real video of stuff where people are being kidnapped, and the raid that is featured in the film that they reenact. They show the real life video of that as well. So this is based on real cases. So I just don't get the thing about how they're trying to say that it's a conspiracy theory. I mean, the film itself is not a conspiracy theory, and the idea which we've just talked about of human trafficking and kids being sold as sex slaves, that is not a conspiracy theory either. That is a real thing. Again, the only thing you can argue is how prevalent it is. So I highly recommend the movie. Check it out, see it, and please let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. And if you want to do something about this issue, I think there's a lot of charities that you can donate to. I think they're mentioned in the film, but I will try to put a link if I can find something in the comments. Thanks.